So this evening we're going to change the focus a little bit. So far we've been hearing from various people about the system of practice, or the mandala of practices that we use in our tradition. So we've been looking at integration and positive emotion from various perspectives. And this evening we're going to hear from a couple of other members of our Sangha about their personal practice of one or other aspects of meditation, and I'm hoping for some sort of application of those practices, those principles in daily life. But that's what they've chosen to talk about. I don't know, it's entirely up to them. But that's the kind of general remit. So just a talking from their own experience of practicing those qualities. So I've no idea, as I said, what they're going to say. Looking forward very much to hearing what they're going to say. And the two bold people who have stepped forwards, have thrown themselves into the limelight, are Alev and John Handley. So that I'll say a little bit about them in a mo. But so they will talk, I don't know, maybe for 10, 15 minutes each. Don't quite know what timescale they have in mind. We shall see. And after that, there'll be an opportunity to go into breakout rooms for 20 minutes to talk about your own practice of integration, integration and positive emotion. At least that's the suggestion. Of course, that's just a guideline. You're free to talk about whatever you want to talk about in the breakout rooms, but that's the sort of suggestion. And then we'll come back together, have a wee pause, a little bit of a wee break, drinks break for a few minutes, and then Jayaratna will be leading us in a Metta Bhavana meditation. And we'll finish as usual with the Last Vandana, the Dhammapalamgata. Okay, so before we ask, I should have asked this before. Are you, Alev and John, okay to be recorded? It's fine if you're not. No? It's really up to you, Alev. If you don't feel comfortable, we won't record you. Really not a problem.
I don't think I mind.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Grand. So I just want to say a little bit about both of them before they start, because I've known John for quite a number of years, and Alev has appeared on the scene, I would almost say erupted onto the scene more recently in the middle of lockdown. So I've never actually met her in person, in the flesh, but I nonetheless have had a very full and real experience of meeting her, mainly through our early morning sits together. Plug for early morning sits, by the way, even though I'm taking a break for a few days, they will still be happening. And Alev just comes across as somebody who is just completely irrepressible. So lives quite a long way away still, lives in Great Malvern currently, but is planning, or firmly intends to move to Shrewsbury in the foreseeable future. I don't know exactly how that's looking, but is very, very keen to play a full part in the life of our Sangha, having come in, as it were, from the outside and never met any of us really in the flesh, in a way that's really commendable, that she's just thrown herself in with great vigour and enthusiasm, and sort of comes to everything, and is supporting the Buddhism course that starts on Thursday week that I'm going to be doing. And all of this without, with very, very little exposure previously to the Shrewsbury Sangha. So, always a smile, always energy, always enthusiasm. And it's just been a delight to have you around virtually in that box on the screen. I'm sure you exist outside that box on the screen as well. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know you more in real life, in very inverted commas, going forward. So I'm very intrigued to hear what you will say. And then our friend John Handley, who has been around this Shrewsbury Sangha for quite a number of years and has thrown himself in as well fully, with given constraints of a very, very busy work life, family commitments and so forth, and sometimes bemoans the fact that he is so very, very busy, but is working on that. But that doesn't stop him being a full, wholehearted participant in the Dharma life in the context of the Shrewsbury Sangha, a man of great gentleness, a harmonizer, I've seen him harmonizing in some quite tricky situations with a great evenness of mind and a sort of great kind of a real strong sort of practice of positive emotion, I would say, throughout. And John is unfailingly courteous and attentive and receptive, as well as being very deeply committed and ever more deeply committed to the three jewels, having asked for ordination and going steadily through the ordination process. And at some point, I look forward to welcoming him into the Order Sangha in the not too distant future. So that's just by way of a little intro. So I don't know, alphabetically speaking, Alev would go first, but I'm easy either way. So Alev looks like she's happy to do that. So with no further ado, I will hand over and mute myself.
Great. Thank you very much, Akasha Raja. Yeah, I'm really happy to be doing this talk because yes, I am new to the to the Shrewsbury Sangha. So I think in a way that's probably one of the reasons why I was keen to do a little talk, really, just so people can get to kind of know me a little bit, if that's possible, by doing a short talk like this. So yeah, I'm going to talk about my experience of metta in my adult life, I should say. I think in my early 20s, so I've had two main experiences of metta, and yeah, in my early 20s, a lot happened, a lot changed for me. Um, I had a successful career, and I I had a successful career. I was happy. I was just kind of going along merrily. Worked in an extremely prestigious department store in Knightsbridge, and yeah, a lot happened in my early 20s. Particular time, so I started losing my eyesight, started deteriorating quite a lot. I came out as a gay woman, and I think, and actually, I was married and as well. So my relationship had come to an end, and so all of these things were huge. They were absolutely massive, and I had to leave my family home and decided to walk away from the marriage, and I had to leave the job because my sight deteriorated. And for myself, it was such a intense, difficult situation. And I think how I dealt with these kind of emerging things. I left. I had to leave my work, and I needed something to kind of fill a huge void that I'd had in my life. So I went along to a weekend yoga, meditation, and massage course, and actually blew me away, really. Just it was a 6-week course, and it kind of blew my mind to bits. And kind of coming from quite a traditional, I'd say boring background. Just not really kind of having been exposed to a great deal of life. I'd all of a sudden I'd experienced a sort of awakening type opportunity within a spiritual context, and it was actually very complicated and very difficult, and so the whole situation kind of enabled me to experience metta from others. And and I think had a very busy kind of childhood, from quite a dysfunctional family upbringing, and it was quite busy, and I never really had the chance to kind of stop and look at the world as it was. And this kind of experience gave me that opportunity. And yeah, it was really difficult, really, really difficult. So that was my first experience of sort of being exposed to metta and the spiritual path. And I didn't actually handle it very well. I didn't handle it at all very well, and I got quite ill. And I'm kind of talking about this experience because later on, then I came across Jayaratna about 6 years ago, and it was just such a contrast. So yeah, going back to my previous experience, I think I was always, since that time, I was exposed to a spiritual life, but I didn't have a context. I didn't have a context. I was on my own, and I kind of like went searching and looking for something alternative. And I knew that I knew just a little bit about Buddhism, and had the opportunity to go and visit the Dalai Lama at Alexandra Palace in London, and I gained a lot from that experience. And I still didn't quite know what Buddhism was. I just knew that there was the Dalai Lama and there was the Buddha statue that looked really beautiful and serene. And but I couldn't find a context. I couldn't find a context, so I continued kind of really struggling on the path. And yeah, without the support and the help and the Sangha, I eventually had to give up that quest and decided to kind of yeah, shut the doors to the spiritual path, as it were. And that was quite sad, because I could see what I was doing, because just the awareness and the mindfulness that I'd gained from that experience kind of showed me that that there was a different way to live. But unfortunately, I had to shut those doors. And so so the sort of second part of my story is when I got involved with Triratna. And yeah, it was amazing. So I experienced more hard times before I'd got to Triratna, because yeah, I'd been exposed to what metta really was, and loving kindness, of course. And yeah, I really loved it. I knew I was a Buddhist. I always knew I was a Buddhist, but I didn't quite fit anywhere in the Buddhist world at that time. So when I came across Triratna at the Quaker Meeting House in Leicester, I kind of, yeah, it was quite an amazing experience. And it just took like one session, and I thought, yes, I found my spiritual home. And I saw the first order member that I met was Vidyasara, and I kind of like looked at her kesa, and I'm just really quite inquisitive and thinking, yes, I'm going to have one of those. I'm going to have one of those one day. And yeah, I was really happy. I was really, really happy and joyful that I knew that I'd found my spiritual home. And I just kept going back again and again and again. And yeah, it was really quite amazing. It was amazing. And I was really grateful from then on in. And yeah, and I'm actually still really grateful. I find myself still extremely grateful after all, after, I was going to say all these years, but actually it's not really that long, really. But I find that I really gravitate towards devotional practice and stories from the Pali Canon, and I really love that. And yeah, I sort of in my 50s, so I knew that, yeah, I was ready to plow myself into something. And I think in my early 20s I was ready to plow myself into something, but I couldn't quite do that then. And actually, and having thought about that, I don't mind, and I don't regret that I couldn't do that then, because obviously I probably wasn't ready mentally and maturely. I probably wouldn't have been able to handle that, to be honest. So now I find myself quite stable in my practice, and I am able to plow myself in there, and I'm in a really good position, because I'm kind of sort of semi-retired, and yeah, I find that I am kind of ready to delve in as deep as I can muster. I found that in these 5 or 6 years that I've really got to know myself quite well. and I feel really supported by the Sangha. And I've been trying to find a sort of Sangha home, because I've had to go with where the situations in my life have taken me, and that's kind of taken me quite the long way around. So Shrewsbury's another journey for me, and I really hope it's my kind of stopping point. I'd like to think that, yeah, I can kind of stay put for, you know, for the foreseeable, and that would be really nice. And I kind of know the area a little bit. I lived in Hereford for a few years, and lived in Malvern as well, and so that's really nice. And I've been volunteering at Adhisthana as well, so yeah, really feel quite sad that I'm going to be leaving this area because of Adhisthana. But they've been sort of like in lockdown, as we all have it for the past year, so I'm kind of used to not having that context. So I find that it's kind of easier for me to come out of that context and go into another situation. So I'm really, really pleased to be welcomed by the Shrewsbury Sangha. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to taking part in the events, and really looking forward to seeing people in real life. But yeah, I think that's it really. And yeah, just nice to have this opportunity to get people to sort of like get to know me a little bit better.
Thank you, Alev. Can I know this wasn't necessarily part of the deal, but can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You talked early on in that introduction about how it was you were exposed, as it were, to metta in the spiritual life quite early, but you found it really difficult. Can you say a little bit about why that was, what the struggle was?
Yeah, it was really, really difficult, because I I do believe in Buddha nature, and I was exposed to metta in its fullness, and people within the context of me doing my course were really lovely. They were kind and they were lovely. But then when I got out of the course, the world was such a horribly harsh place, and I found that like too difficult. And of course, I didn't have a sangha, so I didn't have a framework. I didn't have friends, spiritual friends, and I was living in a bedsit in Brixton, and yeah, it was harsh. It was really harsh, and so not having the context just really, really made me quite ill. I did have mental health problems because that I didn't have the support, and I kind of got myself out of that rut literally by brute force and ignorance, and and I did it in a very natural, holistic way. And I kind of shut myself away in my home, in my flat, in my little bedsit for a couple of years, and really nurtured myself and nourished myself with books and just kind of keeping myself a little bit separate from the harshness of life. But yeah, it was horrible, and it was hard because I didn't have a support network really, which is why, of course, like I kind of came across Jayaratna and thought, yeah, this is an amazing situation, because there's a lot of systems and practices in place to hold a spiritual context, really.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's like when you live and move within the Triratna Sangha, and most of the people, in my case, most of the people I know and associate with are in Triratna, it's sometimes hard to, it's easy to forget that it's not necessarily always like that everywhere.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't when I was in my early 20s. Yeah, I didn't know any spiritual friends. I didn't have any spiritual friends. Yeah, the world was very harsh, very, very harsh and unforgiving.
So now I'm going to hand over to John Handley.
Thank you, Akasha Roger, and thank you very much, Alev. I'm looking forward to meeting you. One of the things that I recognise is a Sangha is composed of all the people, And to have somebody like yourself come into the Shrewsbury Sangha, it was wonderful. It's what we need, and it would be really lovely to have you. So yeah, it'd be nice to meet you. I was quite hesitant in stepping forward in speaking because I have spoken several times before, and I suspect that what I'm going to say, one or two of you may already have heard. So my apologies if you have. But I'll tell you a little bit about my background to why I've chosen to talk about the Metta practice. It's not the one I find the easiest. It's not my go-to. I would say that my natural disposition is towards following the breath, very definitely. Early on, before I even knew anything about meditation, there would be periods within my life where I would just stand still. I would either be looking at a tree or I would be listening to birds, but I would just be paying attention, and that would be my kind of natural go-to. So when I encountered the Metta Bhavana practice, I wasn't so much resistant as it took me a long time to warm up to it. And I've said before that I don't think I actually recognized that I had feelings till about 10 years ago. And it's through being around people, certainly within the context of the Sangha, who talk about their feelings and talk about their experiences in that particular context and how they work with their emotions, that's enabled me to kind of become more literate with my emotional life, which I'm extremely thankful for. When I came to meditation, it was really through need. If I hadn't done something about the way I was behaving, I would have lost my family, 2 young children and a wife who would have just walked away, and quite rightfully too. I was a very bitter and angry individual, and I felt that I'd lost out. I'd lost opportunities, and that I was stuck. But a good friend of mine helped point me in a direction which enabled me to sort of sit down. And around about the same time, I encountered the notion that if I did something for 28 days, it would become a habit. So I sort of combined that with meditation and thought, okay, well, we'll try and meditate on 28 days solid and see what happens as a result. And it did stick. And I'm really pleased that it did. I was told, Bayonara kind of said last week, and I related very strongly to that, if I'm told to do something, that's what I do. I don't imaginatively step outside of that. I just do what I'm told. So having read that the two practices were Metta Bhavana and mindfulness of the breath, that's what I did. And I still very much do today. A little bit more creatively, but that's pretty much what I do, alternate days. It was quite early on within the context of practicing meditation and within the context of a Sangha that I really started to see the benefits. And it might not even be within the context of meditation itself. Often it would be, I'd sit in those days for 15, 20 minutes in the morning, and I'd get up and think, well, that was a waste of time. And then a couple of hours later, just very blissful experience or some sort of brief insight into what was going on. So I kind of saw that there were benefits occurring, but within the context of Metta, it was a very specific experience that I kind of thought, wow. As I said, I was quite an angry individual, and where I was working, I kind of got into a situation where that's where I was going to be, and there was nothing I could do about it. Young family and responsibilities, and I felt that I couldn't get out of that situation, so I was quite angry. And then the people that I was working with, a couple of the individuals I really struggled with. I recognise it was me struggling now. I can say that. I wouldn't have termed it that way in those days. It was so bad that when we were working together, there were situations where we would square up against each other, literally face to face. And we didn't come to blows, but it came close. And yeah, I was quite explosive in my temper, and yeah, not nice to be around. And the other individual was talking about, he obviously had a significant experience, emotionally blocked and not being able to express himself. A rather bizarre situation occurred whereby we were both sent off on a boat to Ireland. We'd never done that before. It hadn't happened in the history of the organisation. I can't see that it was particularly necessary, but it happened. And those conditions brought us into the context of being together and having to be together. And the metta practice I'd engaged in, probably for a year or so by that stage, enabled me to have the courage to say how I felt about him, about me, about our relationship. I talked about his strengths, what I saw were his strengths in that particular context and I couldn't emulate, and what my strengths were and how they differed. And that completely changed our relationship. I can't say that we were ever really very great friends, but we just didn't struggle. And I would say, I can't say for him, but I'd say he changed as an individual too, quite significantly. But that made me realize that it's very much, it changed the relationship I had with the practice itself. I could see that the difficulties I was having were the difficulties that I was having. It wasn't the world outside. So it changed the way I related to that fourth individual in that particular practice. And that was quite a significant incident for me. That made me recognize no matter how difficult that practice is, it's definitely the most rewarding for me. It's still difficult. I still struggle, and it's still not my go-to practice. But I've learned that there are certain things I can do that enable me to engage more with the practice itself. So I thought I'd try and talk about how I do that. One of the things that I find quite easy is to be inspired by nature. And that naturally sets off within me a state of gratitude. And when I contemplate that, that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, I look at the things I have in my life, and I look at how I'm lucky I am to have those things, and that none of them are independent. And the more I look at that, the more I see how I'm just a small part of something much bigger. And that really helps. That sense of appreciation. Yeah, that helps me feel that aspect of developing a relationship with something that's much larger than me. So that's one thing that I do. The first person, myself, within the context of the practice, can be quite difficult. And quite often in the early days, I'd kind of bear with that particular stage, and then we get to the second stage and be like, okay, well, this is easy now. That's not a problem. And a lot of the time, I would have a couple of people that would be my go-to individuals, no problems at all. And I would either envisage them opening a door. Quite often it would be me stood in front of their front door, knocking on the door, stepping back, them opening the door, and then seeing their reaction. And then for me, it's that aspect of what arises when I see them too. And then that warms me, and then my my go-to then would be to give them a hug in those days. And I've been staggered at how difficult not being able to hug people has been over the last year. I think that for me has been the most difficult aspect. So that really then spending time, you know, in that situation, just imagining that I'm hugging them and them hugging me. And that's just a really lovely feeling. And that helps that connection I have with that individual, helps them grow. And then we can kind of sit and talk. We can spend some time in their house or my house, just sitting and talking. In that particular context, just bringing them into being really helps me connect with that particular individual. So that's something I kind of played with. That third stage where I'm connecting to strangers, I kind of ran out of people, which you talk to a lot of practitioners, and that is quite a common story, that you need somebody that you don't know because you want to get to know these individuals, and sometimes you have to kind of keep somebody. I don't want to say hello to postman because I want him in my metta practice, but then you do, and you get to know them, and a lot of the time it's then having more of a story for their lives to put them into context. They have families, they might have children, they have relationships, and adding that layer enables you to kind of see them with more color and see that they're no different to you, to me, and that really helped. I'm very lucky that Cheryl, my wife, she works in the local school, so invariably those kind of she'll say, well, yeah, the postman's got a son, his son's in the school, and already I've got that kind of, it's there, and I can sort of imagine that situation. So yeah, that helps with the third. And I don't really struggle other than trying to locate somebody, because I don't know them. It's much easier then to be able to connect them, in a similar manner to, well, they share so many things that I share. They do so many things that I do, particularly if they're local. They live in the same place, very similar experiences. One of the things that I've learned is, if there's a difficulty, if I am having a difficulty, invariably it's me that's having the difficulty. And it's good to be able to look and see where that is. And sometimes I've been in situations where I'm desperately trying to connect to Metta, and I'm trying to generate a clear view of this individual. But there's actually, if I just let that go, sometimes there's something that comes through which adds a level of understanding that I was trying to be too forceful. But just letting go, you then see something that you didn't see before. You might see that individual in a slightly different light, and that all of a sudden enables you to kind of think, oh yeah, that's me seeing that, and that changes things again. So yeah, the fourth stage, again, it's always a case of going, okay, yeah, this is me with this particular difficulty, and inevitably I can find the people who are in my second stage and my third stage already, they can be in the fourth stage too, so that kind of moves around. And that difficulty we have with people that we love can be difficult too, so it's not always straightforward. One of the things I recognized was, how do you kind of generate that aspect of metta if you're really not feeling it? And I learned a trick by listening to a led meditation where the individuals talked about putting a hand over your heart. And quite often, if I'm really struggling, I will just sit with my hand over my heart, and that has quite a significant effect. That seems to, I can feel the warmth there, and then I can feel the life there, and that just, it changes things for me slightly. So that sometimes helps me. And listening to led meditations. You know, if I'm in a situation where I'm just kind of really, is there something else I can do? It's a different meditation. I know that's what I need. So then sometimes a led meditation can be a real, a real gift. So yeah, and I owe you a great gift, Jayaratna. Thank you very much. I keep going back to you. Thank you. And the app, meditation app, makes a big difference for me. A variety of different styles and people leading it. Sometimes somebody will just say something and there's a particular phrase and you just connect to it, and it makes a big difference. And that aspect of just being receptive, I've learned that over time, even if something doesn't feel like it's had an effect, you never know. You just don't know. It could be later in the day, it could be several weeks later. All I know is if I keep doing it, hopefully it'll keep having an effect, and trusting that the practice will bring about the change. Yeah, I think that kind of comes to a natural end.
Thank you, John. That was lovely. Again, very honest, very heartfelt, and with some really interesting insights about meditation and about the nature of about owning our own reactions to things, which I think is so important. You know, it's so easy, isn't it, to kind of place the responsibility for how we feel on other people, and the great honesty and humility that you learn not to do that. So thank you for that and for those tips. With a hand on the heart, I will remember that.
Roger. Yeah, and thank you from me to Alev and John for those talks. As I said in the breakout room, I always find it's very moving to hear people's experience, because we don't often talk about our meditation practice, and perhaps we could do more of it. Looking at the clock, it will have to be a high-speed metta, I think. We haven't got a lot of time, but even as an old friend of mine said, Jayaratna, even 5 minutes meditation is worthwhile. And I've kept that in my mind ever since, because sometimes I think, oh, if you can't do 40 minutes, it's not worth sitting. And it's not true. So we'll do a brief Metta Bhavana practice. So just make sure that you're sitting well or lying down, whatever is most comfortable to you. And I'm going to be focusing more on the kindness aspect of loving kindness. Now we're going to start with a general body scan, nothing too detailed, just becoming aware of the posture of our body here and now. Aware of the position of the arms and the legs, the head, aware of our contact with our chair, floor, feeling our body being supported, just relaxing into that support. and being receptive to how the body feels. We may be aware of pleasant feelings in the body. In some places, there may be unpleasant or painful feelings. And some neither pleasant or unpleasant. And just accepting how the body feels. Accepting it with kindness. Welcoming our experience. Aware of the thoughts and feelings that are around for us at this moment. And accepting and welcoming our thoughts and feelings, emotions. So whatever we're experiencing in the body, the mind, or the heart, we welcome with kindness. With acceptance. And including a friend. Extending that same quality of kindness to our good friend. That same quality of kindliness, warmth, acceptance to both ourself and the friend. and widening that kindness to include more people, starting with the people on the screen in front of you. Bringing more and more of those people into your wish for acceptance, receptivity, and kindness. And for the next few minutes, just keep widening the number of people, extending as far as you can. Bringing the awareness back to ourselves, sitting in meditation. That feeling of kindness and warmth for ourselves. And a receptivity to all living beings. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened, where it has begun to stir. May it never fade, and may it awaken fully. So Vajrapriya, if you could put up the words of the Last Vandana, please.
Sorry, just one moment.
Thank you. And we'll chant that in unison, as usual. The Last Vandana. Sabha papa saha karanam kusalasa upasampada sachita pariyodapanam etam buddhanam sasanam Dhammam chare sucharitam nanam ducharitam chare Hamachari sukhang seti asmin loke parangicha Natavata tamataro yavata bahupasati yochapam pisutvana Dhamman kayena pasati Save dhammataro hoti o Dhammang napamajati Nati me saranang anyang Buddho me saranang varang Etena sachavachena Hotu me jaya mangalam Nati me saranang anyang Dhammo me saranang varang Etena sachavachena Hotu me jaya mangalam Nati me saranang anyang Sangho me saranang varang Etena sachavachena Hotu me jaya mangalam Namo Buddhaya Namo Dhammaya Namo Sanghaya Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu